CLNSradio.com, the home of Internet Sports Talk Radio.
This is Austin Ames. You're listening to the Celtics Late Night Show on CLNS Radio.
Hey, this is Sam Romanella from K&M All-Star Sports. You listen to the Celtics Late Night Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Celtics Late Night Show, broadcasting live on www.clnsradio.com. We're now joined by our special guest for this evening, Art Rondeau, contributor to SheridanHoops.com. Art had a terrific article written today on SheridanHoops.com with a temporary solution for the NBA lockout. Art, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get right to the point here. You had the article today on SheridanHoops.com, Art Rondeau's stop-gap solution to the NBA lockout, and you presented a plan in that piece to end the NBA lockout, a temporary plan to get them to play a full NBA season this year. So I just have to ask you first, what is your stance on the NBA lockout?
Well, I think that things have gotten a little nasty. I think things have dragged out a little bit too long. I also agree that fans. There are a lot of fans that are knowledgeable, but there are a lot of fans that don't understand a lot of this and just see two rich sides fighting. And I do think that getting back to playing basketball is going to be a lot better for the sport.
Well, prior to you coming on the show, we were having a discussion regarding the fan base of the NBA and whether this is going to hurt the casual fan from tuning in. Do you think that's the case? Do you believe even though their players, the owners, may have to give back 1 or 2%, that it's going to ultimately hurt them if they don't play the season because they're going to lose out on that revenue from these fans that may turn away?
Yeah, I think particularly in markets where they're not selling out all the time. I know that the Celtics are pretty much filling the Fleet Center, shows you how long I've been away from Boston. The TD Bank North Center is pretty much capacity every game, and the Lakers, same thing. But smaller venues where they're not filling up all the time, there are going to be people who just don't want to go because they got tired of all this. And they don't understand it. Maybe they're not working, or they've had to take cuts to keep working, and they're seeing a bunch of rich people fighting, and they don't understand it. They'll walk away.
Well, in your piece that you wrote on Sheridan Hoops, you do suggest that the owners let the players have the 53% of basketball-related income that the players are willing to go with for 1 year in an attempt to play a full season. Do you believe by giving in to the players and letting them have that 53%, do you believe the owners would lose any power for future negotiations if they were to have to go through another thing like this next season?
Well, I think basically what I'm looking at is keeping both sides with their big leverage. So obviously the owners have canceling games, which cost players paychecks, and the big leverage for the union really is decertifying and going to court, which you hear some people pro and some people con on. So by giving the 53%, it needs to be made clear to everybody that it's not a commitment by the owners to keep doing that, and it's not a commitment to the players to keep doing it either. What it does, though, is it addresses the short-term issue of the $300 million in losses that the NBA claimed for last year, and allows the league to get going again. There's been a lot of articles showing the math and saying, you cancel 2 weeks of the season and you're already costing yourself more than you would if you just agreed on the 50-50 split. So that's the goal. Definitely not to put the owners in position of, well, you paid us 53 last year, so you're going to have to pay us 53 again this year. This is just we finally got an agreement on one thing that the players are coming down to. Let's go with that, cut back on the losses, play the games, and then get back to the table.
Hoops fans, you're listening to the Celtics Late Night Show right here live on CLNSradio.com. We're live with Art Rondeau. Art, I got to ask you a question here. For the passionate NBA fans such as ourselves, will you explain decertification?
Yeah, the decertification basically is that the union stops being a union, and I'm kind of probably in the middle of knowledge on this, a little more than the casual fan, but not as much as some of the attorneys that have been commenting. But basically what it allows them to do is take the NBA to court. If they decertify the union, they take the NBA to court, and I believe it's an unfair labor practice case, because then the lockout is not legal at that point. So, obviously the only way they can do that is if there is a lockout, which we have right now.
Well, Art, I have to ask you. You proposed this temporary solution, which is fantastic. I just have to ask you, say that this is something they did go towards, they did agree to this, what you're proposing. Do you think that this would cause a distraction for the upcoming season? I mean, at the same time they're playing the games, but they also have it in the back of their mind that next season they're going to have to do this again. They're going to have to get to a better deal. Do you think that would cause any distractions? Would it maybe cause any unhealthy relationships between players and owners just with a temporary deal?
Sure, that's a great question. I think there's two parts to the idea. One of them is to get the games going now, but also to have negotiations continue. Probably have to have them out in LA during Laker, homestands, because Derek Fisher's so much a part of this. But with the goal of having this all resolved before the end of the season. But the second part, and this was to keep the leverage for both the owners and the players, is that they pick a date and they agree now to a lockout beginning. I think I picked August 16th for the date, and that would allow summer league to take place. And since if there is a lockout, teams can't work with their players, they can't go to rehab, stuff like that. Anybody that got injured during summer league, the team could set them up with the appropriate physical therapists and doctors. And then the lockout goes back into effect on the 16th of August. The reason to have the lockout go back is that ensures that the union could decertify and go to court if they wanted to. So their leverage is protected. And ideally, they're going to be close enough today. We'd all like to see it just end today. And but if it doesn't, they seem to be close enough that there are just a few things to resolve. And this would give them the time to do it without the drop dead, Monday close of business, whatever time they're going to close business today, before they cancel 2 weeks of the season.
Well, I do like your optimism, and actually a lot of the writers on Sheridan Hoops, including Chris Sheridan, have all been very optimistic through this process, where some of the other media sources are just not thinking anything's going to get done, that we're just going to be out of an NBA season. But you guys, including yourself and Chris, you guys have been very optimistic, so it's definitely good to get that point of view. Moving on here, you mentioned the 53-47 split of basketball-related income between players and owners. Do you think that would help eliminate the financial losses that the owners are reporting? I believe it went from $380 to $300 last season, the $380 million to $300 million. Do you think the additional 3% or 4% would help them eliminate these losses and maybe make them realize they don't need to go any lower as far as that goes?
That's very possible, and particularly the fact that the owners really do need to do something on revenue sharing, and that's coming soon. But that's going to take care of a lot of the issue as well, and that could be one sticking point. And it's why I said they're not locked into 53 going in further seasons if they do have to implement what I'm suggesting. But the owners want to make a profit, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the players are the reason that people are showing up, and they want to make their money, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just a matter of having some kind of agreement where the fans can win as well, and getting the season going is going to do that.
The last of the first two weeks of the regular season, with that 3% loss of basketball-related income, the loss of preseason, then the first 2 weeks, doesn't that kind of negate any victory, quote unquote, that these labor negotiations are trying to achieve anyway?
I think so. I believe that if they want to really say, they did a great job with the negotiations, and David Stern wants to be able to have that as his legacy, and certainly Billy Hunter as well, then I think they've got to figure out a way to make it happen without canceling the games. They had in 98-99 season, they locked out for the first, I guess they started, mid-January, and the basketball wasn't very good, and they were playing sometimes 3 nights in a row, so more injuries and certainly a lower quality of basketball. If they can figure out a way to get it done today, that would be ideal, and I think that everybody can declare victory at that point.
Steve Nash, Jared Dudley on social media, on Twitter, really downgrading, bad-mouthing the owners. In my opinion, not productive. What are your thoughts? Does it have any bearing whatsoever?
Well, certainly, like Steve Nash, a lot of people respect Steve, and he's got quite a following on Twitter, I know, and I've seen some of the tweets he's posted there. They've got their opinion. I don't have the kind of insider knowledge, obviously, that they do. I do think that both sides probably have been posturing a little bit, and sometimes they've had to do it just in response to something that's happened, that the other side has done. I was really negative about the demand for, the 50-50 split before they were even going to have a meeting on Monday, because I thought even if the players had decided they were going to go for 50-50, they couldn't accept that, the precondition, that it would have been a very bad negotiating move for them to do so. And, there's been stuff on either side, I think, that the other side could say, well, that's not the best thing that they could have said, and, we've got to defend ourselves. But ultimately, it's the guys in the room that know what's going on, and, we'll see what they come out with.
Well, some of the guys, you mentioned the guys in the room. Obviously, Derek Fisher is in there. Paul Pierce has been was being seen at the meetings, as well as Dwayne Wade, who supposedly got in a confrontation with David Stern. So I have to ask you, and I actually brought this up on Twitter earlier, do you think if there was younger guys that haven't really secured a lot of contracts yet, a lot of paychecks, do you think that if there was younger guys that were making this deal, that we would have come to a resolution now instead of guys like Kobe Bryant, Derek Fisher, guys that are probably already set for life, and as far as the financial aspect goes? Do you think it'd help if maybe younger players were in there and maybe they wouldn't stand as strong as these older guys are?
Well, I think that that's a really great point, and the people that this deal is going to affect the most is going to be the younger players that end up having a long career, and they don't have the resources right now like Kobe does. Say, okay, well, we'll see you next year, and you can let us know what you're thinking. Certainly, some of these like Dwayne Wade and Kobe have been talking about financing guys that needed support during the lockout and things like that, and the younger players don't have that. I don't know if it would be a matter of them not standing as strong, but I do think that from their point of view, they need to be playing and getting game checks as soon as possible, and so we might very well have seen a little bit more movement earlier.
Well, another point here with the mid-level exception, I mean, they supposedly came to a deal today with that. I'm not sure. They didn't really say which way it went, how much the owners got back on that, if they got exactly what they wanted. But let's say they did get what they wanted. Do you think getting things like that is going to shouldn't that be giving a little bit of leeway and make up some of the difference and some of the disagreement they're having in regards to the most important issue being the basketball-related income and the split of the basketball-related income?
Absolutely. I think that what's happening now, the remaining issues, and that some of these have been called system issues, like the luxury tax and the mid-level exception and things like that. If the union's going to get a little more of what they want in those things, and they're going to come down somewhat in the BRI. Now, I don't know how much. They've been on Twitter. There's been a hashtag says 51.5, and that's a nice difference between 50 and 53, but I can't say that the owners are going to buy into that. But if the players are going to give back more than they've already given, then they need to make it up in some of these other areas. And that was one of the reasons that the precondition couldn't be accepted, is because not only was the BRI the biggest issue on the table, it was also their biggest bargaining chip. If they're going to get concession in the mid-level, let's say, they're going to have to say, well, okay, yeah, we'll come down another 0.5% on the BRI, but we want this in return for it. So I think what's left is like this package of things that will be negotiated, and then they'll all be on the table, and then all resolved at the same time.
Yes, definitely. There will definitely have to be a lot of give and take there with different issues. And then also, like you said, if they're going to give a little on the mid-level, they should give a little back with the basketball-related income. But moving on here to another issue that really isn't an owner/player issue. It's more of a owner versus owner issue, and that's the increased revenue sharing that is probably going to be discussed for the new CBA. I believe they said $60 million was split up in revenue sharing last year. Do you believe increasing that would hurt the business aspect of the league and almost encourage failure and bad contracts? I mean, really, teams like the Celtics, shouldn't they be rewarded for the way that they're managing their teams instead of having to dish out revenue sharing to other teams that maybe aren't getting themselves as good of contracts as the Boston Celtics?
Well, I do think that it has an impact certainly on teams like the Celtics that have gotten their act together and had it together for a long time, and filling the seats. One challenge that I've seen in the last agreement, and I actually put a proposal together, put it on my blog site a couple of weeks ago, was that when you have fixed salaries, as fixed dollar amounts, but you've got variable revenue, you're heading for disaster. And so if you've got somebody in a small market that's got to pay a top person, say $15 million a year, but somebody gets injured, or they can't charge the same amount of money for tickets that they can in Boston or New York or LA, then you've got less revenue, but you've still got a very fixed expense. I mean, this is you name the business. We've probably seen this with airlines and card manufacturers and all this over the years as there have been union management negotiations. And so from that standpoint, I had felt that they should go to a share system, and everybody gets shares of 50,000 each, let's say, per share, but then the share price actually gets determined based on the BRI at the end of the year. And so if they had a great year and they brought in the fans, they get more money. If they didn't have a great year, they're going to get a little bit less, but they're still making a bundle. I think that some of the revenue sharing is needed just because of logistics and the fact that they pay the fixed dollar amounts in contracts. I do think you have to be careful, though, that you're not rewarding bad management and things like that, because you're right, it's very easy to do that. In fact, now that they've got investment groups that are buying some teams like Detroit, et cetera, you don't have everybody maybe on the same page with the goal of being, the best team we can be. Sometimes it's got to maybe be how much profit can we make this year, period. And so, I mean, even suggesting, although I don't know if it goes into a CBA deal, I'm suggesting that the league have a mandatory minimum that they spend on coaches and a minimum that they spend on the basketball operations group. They certainly can spend more than that, but you don't want, some team bringing in, a junior high school assistant coach who may someday be, NBA ready, but they'll bring him in because he'll work for $100K, whereas anybody with NBA experience is going to want a couple of million. You can make profits that way, but it's going to hurt the basketball, and you got to keep the product at a high level.
Art, I got to tell you, really interesting insights on the lockout. You're obviously a man that's close to the information, close to the topics. You've also done some really interesting work outside of the lockout, and I was really interested in seeing that you'd work with players like Chris Dudley and Allen Houston as far as some sports psychology, work on free throw shooting, field goal percentage. Could you give us a little bit of your insights into how that works out, that part of our aspect of your career?
Certainly. Well, the free throw program is really mostly a physical thing, about 90% physical, and I figured it out when I was 17, actually. There are reasons other than the angle of your shooting arm that cause most free throws to be missed. And so what happened was just through a whole bunch of coincidences, I happened to get some information. I was able to figure it out. And figured, I'm 17, so obviously the NBA knows this, and I didn't do much with it. And then probably 10 years later, I got sick of watching free throws getting bricked. And in fact, I remember I was in Rhode Island at the time, and I started looking. No, I was in Boston at the time, and I remember Greg Kite just bricking them like mad. I've got
oh my God!
Yeah. I'm kind of
You're making us all
older.
We're showing our age here, Greg Kite.
But what I found was happening, I started working with college players and trying to get an NBA gig, and I found that these guys we improve them right away. They might be 40% free throw shooters, and then all of a sudden in about a week to 10 days we get them up to 70, 75, 80%, and they stay there. And then after maybe a month or so, they start to decline. And if I looked at game film, I'd see that they were doing things that were in their control, and that was causing them to miss. Like, maybe they had a routine that had a 4-dribble, start before they took the free throw. They might, do a 3-dribble start. Well, that's going to mess them up a little bit. Or they might, hurry the shot. You look and see that they were taking 8 seconds, and now all of a sudden, for some reason, they're taking 6. And when I talk to them, I say, what's going on? And they'd say, well, I'm only a 50% free throw shooter. Well, that's a belief about who they were, and they were living into that. So I started looking around to see if there was a way that I could help them change their beliefs, and through another whole series of flukes, ended up watching a Tony Robbins infomercial because a drunk called his girlfriend, misdialed the number, and woke me up in the middle of the night with the TV still on. And I got the tapes and then went to the program and said, wow, this stuff is it's a very powerful stuff that he's working with. It's based on neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, which is very big over in Europe, but not so much over here right now. And so I started kind of playing around with that to see, certainly I could do more than free throws. And I found that I could help players that were in slumps get out of the slumps, usually in a session or two. And it works with, so far, any sport. I've done it with pro golf, pro tennis, NBA, a lot of Division I and Division III basketball players. I've got a U.S. national team fencer, World Cup skier, and most of these are sports that I don't play. I played basketball. It's a while ago, so I've got some knowledge on that. But these are elite athletes. They've had the proper training, so it's in there. It's just a matter of there are certain circumstances that keep them from performing their best. And, we hear about players going into their zone, or whatever they're calling it at the time, but usually a mental zone is what we know it as. And they usually don't know why they got there. And so what my program does is allows them to get there on a game-by-game basis. And so instead of seeing, somebody shooting 70% one night and then 30, 40, 45, and then, maybe a 50 after that, we can get them if they're capable of shooting 70, and we probably have them, in high 50s, low 60s on a night-to-night basis. If their talent, their training, they've got, they're doing all the things they need to do as far as working out and nutrition and all that. It's just a matter of putting them into that zone instead of having them wander into it.
Absolutely fascinating. This is Art Rondeau. Art, we really appreciate your time. And just in case the other Rondeau, Rajan, is listening to this show, how could the listeners find your work? We know Rajan needs work with his free throws. Maybe he'll look you up. How can we find your work?
Well, I've got a website about to be redone, but it's artrondeau.com. That's ARTRONDEAU.com. And on Twitter, I'm at Art Rondeau, and off that, I've got my blog. If you get to my Twitter account, you get my blog site and see some of the things that are going on there as well.
Excellent stuff, man. We really appreciate your time. Your insights on the lockout were fascinating, and even more fascinating, talking about getting in the zone. Less fundamental work, more, it sounds like, more mental work.
A lot of it is. Once you put in the time and the reps with your, with your physical skills, then it's just a matter of making sure you're using them at the right time. So.
All right, Art, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you joining us. Everybody, make sure to check out Art Rondeau's work. You got his Twitter handle. You got his site. We appreciate his time.
CLNSradio.com, the home of Internet Sports Talk Radio.